I keep thinking about when we were kids and how they used to make us practice hiding under our desks in case of an atomic bomb.
Yeah, duck and cover.
Just when you thought it was safe to crawl out from underneath your school desk. Welcome to the Duck and Cover Movie Podcast. My name is Jeremy. You can find me on YouTube under the name The Carnivore Crusader. And with me is one of the co-hosts of Real Life with a Couple of Therapists podcast, Jason. How are you today?
I'm good.
All right, folks. So this is the Duck and Cover Movie Podcast. So the idea behind this, we actually did a podcast just like this several years ago under the same name, where we went and watched movies about the end of the world. And we decided that since we live close enough to each other that we could actually go ahead and get together and go ahead and recreate that podcast. So I'm looking forward to this, man.
Yeah, when is it that we did that? Was that 2009, 10?
So I left California at the end of 2010. So it was a couple years before that.
Okay.
So we had
before podcasts were cool.
Right, exactly. We had our two cousins with us, Jim and Joe. Jim Henderson and Joe Ibarola, they were part of the group with us, so it was always the four of us. And so now it's just the two of us. So you're going to have to listen to the two of us go through our first movie, which is The Day After Tomorrow. And please don't get confused with next week's movie, because next week's movie is The Day After. So, don't get that confused. So today we are doing The Day After Tomorrow. This movie came out on May 28th of 2004. And you know what's interesting is this movie actually had a PG-13 rating, which to me, looking at all the other movies that came out of that period with PG-13, it doesn't need it.
Oh, I think it's because of the death scenes, the mass destruction.
Yeah, I mean, I look at some of the other stuff that came out, that would have like, you could only have like one or two F-bombs in a PG-13 movie. You could have a little bit of nudity in a PG, but this one, yeah, I mean, this one is just people drowning. And
isn't PG-13 relatively new? I mean, not anymore, but like Star Wars there was no PG-13 when the original Star Wars came out.
I don't think that came out till the 90s.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's been around for a while. It's just, I don't know, to me, it's just one of those, looking at the movies that have come out over time, this one doesn't deserve 13, but
right.
What are you going to do? This movie was directed by Roland Emmerich. He also did the screenplay along with Jeffrey Nachmanoff. I think I'm pronouncing it right. The story is by Roland Emmerich. It was produced by Roland Emmerich along with Mark Gordon. And the music was by Harold Klosser. I have to admit, I watched this movie just a couple days ago just to, refresh myself. But the overall theme that's in the movie, even though it's slow and kind of methodic, it actually sticks with you.
Yeah, the score. You're talking about that. Yeah.
Just the overall
right.
Just the overall score. I mean, it's one of those things that it's like as soon as you hear it, oh, Day After Tomorrow.
Well, I think what I think of the score, and actually the movie itself, I was going to bring this up later, but like if I was laying in bed and trying to fall asleep and all I heard was the sound, I would have to think about whether this was Independence Day or The Day After Tomorrow, because they're very similar in how they sound and
yeah,
so.
Well, and that's interesting because he must have used the same music writer, because Roland Emmerich also has credits for Stargate, which came out in 1994. Now that spinned off, Stargate SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe. So there was 3 TV shows off of that. And then he actually did Independence Day in 96.
Oh, okay. So he did do the music.
Yeah.
Okay. That
So
makes sense.
now I'm not sure if Klosser was the same one that wrote the music, but yeah, I mean the music is definitely similar. He also did Godzilla in 1998. Now I don't remember which version that was, since there's a lot. He also did the movie 2012 and 2009. Go figure. And then Independence Day Resurgence in 2016, and that one, that can live in obscurity because
Right.
it just didn't come out very well. So this movie stars Dennis Quaid as Jack Hall, Jake Gyllenhaal as Sam Hall, Emily Rossum as Laura Chapman, and Bilbo Baggins. Ian Holm as Terry Rapson. So and then there's a bunch of other. It's funny. I was actually just thinking about this. A lot of the people in this movie who had small amounts of lines ended up dying.
Right.
Just like a lot of people, like there's, and I'm just going to say this up front for every podcast that we do going forward. Spoilers. Okay, there we go. If you haven't watched this movie by now, too bad. Suck it up. The scene just as the flood's starting to come into New York, there's like three guys who make their way onto the
bus. Yeah. The
And-
guy from Suits.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, they've got a couple lines, dead.
Yep.
The bus driver, dead. The cop, dead.
Right.
Just all these people
Yeah.
that just have one or two lines, they just kill them off.
Right.
So this movie has two different storylines that do eventually come together. At the finale of the movie. The first one is, Jack Hall finding out about the storm, and all the chaos that's coming in, and working to find a resolution. And then the other one is his son Sam. Him and his friends go off to New York for. I forget what it is. Some sort of a
competition.
some
for
sort
their
of
school.
nerd competition, and so his storyline is to stay alive and to keep warm and listen to his dad. And I guess that one of the things that ties the two stories together is that son and dad are sort of estranged just because the parents must have divorced. The parents divorced, but it's probably because Jack Hall was off doing all of his work for years. He'd be gone for months at a time.
Right.
That was something that they alluded to. And so, it's this that ultimately brings them together when he goes off to go and find him in New York. All right. So we are just going to go ahead and just kind of go through. I grabbed a very long synopsis. I don't think I'm going to go through it all, but I grabbed a very long synopsis from IMDb, and I figure we could just kind of talk through the different sections that they have here. So the first one is talking about Jack and his two colleagues, Frank and Jason, are out in the Antarctic, and they're drilling for ice cores. And as they're out there drilling, part of the ice breaks off, and they're trying to say that it's the size of Rhode Island that broke off, and I guess is melting and on its way to out to the ocean.
Right.
So that's supposed to be a bad thing. Then it jumps to India, where Jack is at this conference talking about climate change, and climate change is going to kill us all, but whatever. And so he starts getting into sort of a debate with the vice president of the United States, who happens to be there, and they don't agree with the vice president doesn't agree with Jack's thoughts about this climate change. What Jack is trying to say is that in the cores that they found 10,000 years before, there was some sort of cataclysmic event that caused the ice age.
Right.
And according to his information, this is supposed to happen maybe in the next 100 years, maybe in the next 1,000.
Right.
And so the vice president's just kind of mocking him like, don't be making sensationalist claims when you don't really have the information.
Right.
So,
it's. I mean, it kind of starts us out with the classic disaster movie scenario where
Right.
we have the scientist who's on his own basically discovers that something huge is going to happen. Nobody believes him.
Right.
That sort of thing, and so that's like storyline A.
Right.
So it's the same type of thing. I think what it is what he discovered, or what he's theorizing, is that there was a change in the salination. Because of the ice, it's adding fresh water to the seawater, and then it's throwing off the salination balance, and then it causes it triggers a freeze.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, he talks about later on when they're all meeting at NOAA. He talks about desalinization.
Right.
Where that mixture of fresh and ocean water is too much.
Right. So, the vice president sort of represents just the common, person that he's trying to convince. It's not going to work. They think he's crazy and out there. So, this is a story that has been told many times. Just change the content of whatever it is that's, whether it's an asteroid coming or aliens coming or, but yeah, so that kind of starts it that way. And then, it throws in, I mean, this is sort of the age of CGI when we're starting to see, they've really kind of got the model down. So they're kind of mass producing. I mean, around this time we had The Core, Armageddon.
Yep.
They just churned out all these disaster movies because they could do it with relatively cheap.
Right.
And and it's something that kind of gets attention easily. So they throw in those scenes. I think the next thing was, how it doesn't all take place. It ends with New York in the north freezing, but it's L.A. right with the tornadoes.
Yep.
Is that what happens next?
Yeah. So, the next scene after India is Bilbo getting back to his lab in Scotland, and they're just really quickly introducing the two other guys that work with him.
Right.
And then Jack is back in Washington, and he's got all this data, and he needs to. He needs to go through it all, but he doesn't have the computing power to be able to do it. So he's asking for time on their supercomputer.
Access to the mainframe. We need access to the mainframe. Can you give it to us?
We can't do it fast enough without that. So,
right. And then the Bowies, right? That's where the sensors go off, and
right.
So we have all these different things happening that are foreshadowing.
We have at first, there's just one buoy that's going off, and the two guys that work with Rapson are saying, "Oh, that one's probably just knocked around.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just send somebody out to go look at it. It's no big deal." But then, once we come back to those guys in a little bit, we find that there's actually three.
Right.
So, but we haven't gotten there yet.
So around this time in the story, this is where we're introduced to Donnie Darko.
Yep.
Right. And then we have part B of the storyline, which is the estranged dad.
Right.
Now I get this one mixed up with 2012 because it was the same story.
Just two different. Same story.
A dad that's a limo driver who's been estranged. He's a writer, but it's the exact same. Well, kind of different because actually, John Cusack was not the scientist.
Right.
He was someone who was around someone who heard something that was happening. But other than that, it was like exactly the same story.
And then don't they go? That's the one where they go off to the stage. Woody Harrelson out in the
in Wyoming, right?
It's like, it's coming, man.
That was actually pretty good.
But we'll get to that movie eventually. Okay. Right now, we're continuing with The Day After Tomorrow. So so we get to the story where we're introduced to the son and the ex-wife. The son is going off to New York, and the dad's like Sam's on a team. Sam's getting on a plane. You know, Sam is actually having a life outside of the house, kind of thing. So,
Right.
and then of course they throw in the line, I think there's a girl involved. Yeah, okay, there we go.
Of course there is.
We have to set up the little quick romance love story there.
Mm-hmm.
So Sam gets picked up by his dad the next day, driven to the airport, and they actually start having a conversation about Sam's ability in math class to be able to answer questions without having to write it all out, and the teacher thinks he's cheating.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a very small amount right there of like an interaction between dad and son, but then, the dad steps up, well, I'm going to go talk to him. And the kid's like, nah, later.
Yeah, they're trying to show that, dad doesn't understand,
Right.
and this is the distance between them.
Yeah.
And then there's literal distance.
Right, exactly.
Right. So, okay. So then, and on the plane, that's when the turbulence happens, and then they get to New York.
Right. And we're introduced to the two friends, and Sam's character is just really tense. There's no discussion of about if he's ever been on a plane or anything like that, but
Well, they said he hates to fly.
he said it, yeah, he hates to fly, but there's did something ever happen? They don't talk about that. It's just he doesn't like to fly. So then we're also seeing, like, in Tokyo, all of a sudden, hail the size of golf balls starts slamming into the ground. And then we get to LA, and there's a short scene, well, not short scene, but there is several scenes of weather guys. There's one who's supposed to be monitoring the weather, but of course he's making out with a girl. And they start. There's a reporter that's out at the beach, and again, softball size hail is coming down. It's funny because he says hail the size of golf ball. Golf ball's only like what, an inch and a half.
These are like the size of bricks.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's just like, okay. So they go through all of that. They discover that hey, we're going to have to put out some sort of warning over the TV that there's tornadoes or possible tornadoes. And then what ends up happening is you see like this wide shot of LA, and there's like four.
Right.
That are all just kind of circling around. One destroys the Hollywood sign, which I think,
of course,
anytime they have a disaster movie, they've got to do that.
Yeah.
So, and buildings are being destroyed. The
Capitol
Records,
yeah.
that ends up getting destroyed. So that all that devastation, and just as it ends, Jack is watching that on TV at NOAA on the East Coast. So they're starting to get more information that this stuff is starting to build up. And then so now once that's over, so just before that, what ends up happening is we switch to England, where there are 3 helicopters that are flying in snow. They're heading towards, or actually, they're over Scotland. They're heading towards Balmoral Castle, and what ends up happening is the temperature drops to negative 150, which is apparently the temperature at which fuel gas freezes. So
negative 150 Fahrenheit. Is that even true?
I have no idea. That's something I didn't look up. Yeah. But that was something that they actually made sure to mention that specific number.
A few times. Yeah. I think they mentioned it a couple of times.
Yeah, because Bilbo actually says negative 150 degrees. We had to look it up.
Right.
So, rather than someone just saying, probably arbitrarily, we'll just call it 150.
Right.
I think they just, they must have looked up something.
Right.
So we find out that those happened, and that anybody that was out or was in that area froze immediately. There was zero survival.
Right.
The helicopters crash land. One guy starts to open the door and takes in a breath, and that's it.
Right, the instant freeze.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like we're introduced to the scene. We know that this is like the ultimate, enemy weapon here.
Right.
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 It's, unlike Independence Day, where it's aliens, we're battling the weather.
Right.
And this, so like that scene in Independence Day with the mega weapon that just destroys everything.
Right,
This
right.
is sort of the storm's weapon.
Right.
Right. So they flash this, and then you don't see that happen again until like the end of the movie.
Right.
Right.
Where
The eye of the storm.
It's the eye of the storm. That's the only time that they ever reference that until later when he's already in New York and about to, or he's on his way to New York to get to his kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that is like the ultimate boss fight right there.
Right.
We have to, we have to make sure we avoid him at all costs as we go through.
Yeah. All of the foreshadowing in this movie was not subtle at all. It was very apparent.
Yeah.
It
was we're gonna quickly show you this eye of the storm. Oh, look, everybody froze. Even
this is
helicopter.
coming back, everyone.
Yeah.
Watch out for this. Same with her cutting her leg
Right.
in the cab. So that that starts the usual side quest for these movies, which is someone gets an infection and needs the penicillin that's always somewhere.
Yeah.
There's always some place that has penicillin that's close by.
Right.
And you just got to run to it.
Yeah, and somehow it's a freighter that somehow floats
like an oil tanker.
Yeah.
In this case, yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, okay, so Sam is now at his academic competition with his friends. We're introduced to JD. JD and Laura are looking at each other going, cute. But we also are seeing that the rain has been coming down for several days continuously, and it's just not letting up. Mm-hmm. At one point, so what ends up happening is they're finding out that trains are no longer running. The subways, like Grand Central Station, subways are no longer, they're all flooded out.
Right.
So they can't get home via train. So JD says, hey, why don't you guys come back to my house? I live up in a penthouse, so, we can just kind of wait out the storm, because at that moment they're thinking, well, it's just rain, it's no big deal. And so they end up heading to his house, and then while they're on their way, they stop at the Natural History Museum, and there is a quick little line from his friend Brian where it talks about he's reading something about a mammoth that froze, at the 10,000 years ago with the cataclysm
still in its mouth,
with food still in it.
Another slap in the face foreshadowing.
Right, exactly. It's just the idea. He just froze instantly. Wow, will that ever happen again?
I wonder. That sounds terrible. Yeah.
So now we switch back to Jack. So Jack is now trying to get the information to the vice president, and the vice president still is, well, you were wrong before. What makes you, why do you think you're right now? He's just still playing the I don't believe you card, and just so Jack's line is, if we don't make changes now, it may be too late. And the vice president's just like, nah, later, I'm out, and just keeps walking.
Right.
So the storm continues to get worse in Manhattan. So they find out that that the trains and everything. So they're gonna try and get a ride with JD's driver. So they head downstairs, and so they're just kind of they're trying to make their way. I think they're trying to make their way over to wherever the driver is. He's like probably several streets.
Well, I think they were going to head to pick up his brother in Philadelphia.
Yeah,
right.
So they had to meet up with the driver
right.
so they could get the ride. So they're heading off, and the rain just continues to get worse and continues to get worse. And so they decide, okay, you know what, we're gonna have to get inside because we're not gonna get anywhere. So they're at the library. So they start heading towards the door, and that's when the camera switches over to a cab that has two people in it. It's a mother and daughter. They're speaking French. There's a cop there that is trying to talk to them, but they can't communicate. So Laura, of course, we have to insert, speaks French. So she turns around, goes off, and, they're trying to communicate. So she ends up able to talk to them. So the cop says, I'm going to break the window. So he's able to break the window. They get the woman and the girl out. And then at some point, like you said, Laura ends up cutting her leg. And it's just something very quick. It switches to the water. You see a little bit of blood flowing, kind of floating out, and then that's really it. They get her to come back. Oh yeah. So she's on her way, and then the woman's yelling about my purse. It has our passport. So of course.
So she has to go back and get it.
I'll go back and get it. Right. And then so she starts running, and then Sam sees the wall of water coming.
Yes.
So get back in. So they get them in. The water comes flooding up, and then the scene ends.
Where did that come from anyway? The giant, massive tidal wave.
Well, that's supposed to be like this. My understanding is because of that huge.
That giant piece of ice.
Yeah. Because of that breaking off, unless there was more, because the story never says.
Well, it would just be interesting if that's the case, because that happened at the beginning of the story. You'd think there would have been tsunamis or tidal waves everywhere, but just in New York.
Right.
They didn't have any word of this, a giant wave like that.
Yeah.
So, that was the one thing, like everything else made sense with the weather.
Right.
And then there's just this massive wave.
Right.
So
exactly.
I don't know how that works. I mean, but nobody ever mentioned it.
No.
Nobody was like, hey, all of New York could go underwater.
Right. I mean, at one point as you see the wave coming, you see the Statue of Liberty, and the water is almost
covered.
up to her armpit.
Right.
So I mean, it's supposed to be like 100 feet high, and so it's just barreling its way in.
But it only hit New York. Everywhere else was spared.
Yeah, as far as we know, that was the only place that all that water went to. So whatever. So we switch back to Washington. So now let's see. So survivors in the northern United States are forced to flee to the south, with some Americans illegally crossing the border into Mexico. Which I don't know. I found that amusing. Just this idea that everybody's driving to the border, and they're like, screw it, we're walking.
Right.
Because
they tear down the fences and they cross the river and all
they
that.
just somehow tear one fence, and they're just all heading. They're all crossing. So at one point, what ends up happening after that is we switch back. We switch back to L.A. Or we switch back to New York, and Sam is, he hasn't called his parents. He hasn't been able to get a hold of them. But JD says something about, all the cell phone lines are jammed. So Sam has this idea that, well, I might be able to use a payphone, because according to him, and this could be true, I don't know, but it says that payphones draw their power from the line that it's connected to directly.
Right.
So he runs down to where there is supposed to be a payphone, which at this point is almost completely underwater. So he gets over there, he calls his dad, his mom is already there.
Yeah.
So they're able to communicate.
And he's speaking on a waterproof phone, apparently.
Right.
Because, this thing's submerged underwater.
Right, yeah. I mean, when he picks it up, the whole unit is just underwater. But, it's going up seconds. It's going up. So he's able to communicate very quickly that he's in New York, that he's at the library. Can you please, tell my friend's parents that they're okay? And then the line disconnects. So that's when Jack decides, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to go after my kid. So he ends up packing up. They start packing up all their stuff, and they're getting ready to go. So now the two stories are starting to get to the point where they're going to converge. The last thing that Jack is asked to do is go and talk to the president directly. So they end up going to the White House, and I don't know. The one thing that I didn't like about the guy, or at least the character of this president, is he was just very. He didn't know how to answer anything.
Right.
At one point when they were talking about when the vice president came in earlier, was saying, the FAA is asking that we shut down all plane traffic, until the storm is over.
Yeah.
So
and he says, "What do you think we should do?"
What do you think we should? And it was just the way he asked. I was like, "Well, what do you think we should do?"
Right.
Like, oh my god. It's like.
Yeah, I mean, the president in this is a side character.
He is.
And even during that debriefing, because
Yeah.
why is Jack the only science person that we're talking to, that the president's talking to? There should be other people, but
Well, and because it's his model, his one and only model, that is the answer to everything.
right.
It's
The only one that made sense
Right.
compared to all the other models. But I still think there would be other science and meteorologists.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And
should
they're
be somebody
talking.
else.
But
But it's his science MacGuffin thing. That's like, this is how the thing's going to go. We're going to be able to predict everything now because now we understand.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jack ends up leaving. He's, the vice president the whole time is just kind of So Jack leaves. He gets ready to go. And then they come back, and the president, the vice president, and I somebody probably from the Joint Chiefs, they're talking, and the vice president's like, I can't believe you're going to listen to this guy, and the other gentleman, I don't remember the character's name, but was like, well, you didn't do anything when we tried to tell you, about the science and about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his line was something along the lines of, basically, it's like, well, Jack's got no skin in the game, kind of thing. There's nothing. He's safely here in Washington, and then
His son is in New York.
His son is in New York, and then all of a sudden, the vice president's face is like, oh my gosh, now I understand it all.
Okay.
Yeah. That one line all of a sudden changes his whole attitude about Jack. So it's like, whatever.
Well, yeah, that's the interesting part about this movie, though, is that for these main characters, all of the side characters, it's like nobody's panicked or worried about any of their family.
Exactly.
Only these two are.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, all my family's dead, but hey, at least maybe you can see your son again.
Yeah, I mean the scene after that, or just as they finish, in that war room or whatever, we cut to the president walking into the Oval Office, and the guy picks up the phone and he says the lady's name, I don't remember, and then there's this pause, and then he says, "Get me my wife."
Right.
And it's like talking to his wife is an afterthought. It just. I mean, if I were in that movie and I were married, but that would be the first thing I'd be doing is, get my wife on the phone right now, and because this may be the only time that I ever get to talk to her.
Sure.
So, and then that's we will see the president one more time, but that's the end for the president. He doesn't end up making it. So, of course, we get the vice president who's already somehow safe in Mexico.
Yeah.
But what. And who they don't obviously talk about that. So, all right. So now we're back to Washington D.C. Jack and his two friends have packed up their truck and they're on their way. So now we get to the scene in the library with the books, and talking about, first they're talking about, oh, you can't burn books. Then they start talking about Friedrich Nietzsche, and and they're just having these conversations about oh, we got to keep this book. Oh, but it's okay to get rid of this book. It's like, who cares at this point?
Yeah.
The whole point is either you stay alive or you sit here and debate about some author.
Right. Well, I think they were trying to throw that in where it's like, if this is the end of the world, are we going to try to preserve anything from
Right.
from this era? But they did have a lot of books on tax code that they
That they could
were
burn,
able to
so
burn.
that's no big deal.
yeah. Yeah, I mean that's that. This movie though, I'll tell you, because I remember I did see it like when it came out, and the one thing I did take away from this movie was that I didn't know that you could crumble up newspaper or paper and shove it in your jacket to keep warm.
Yeah.
So I'll always be in debt to this, just in case I'm ever in freezing weather. I'm going to do that.
You can use it as insulation.
Insulation, yeah.
But I mean, here we are in 2024. I mean, newspapers are certainly,
Right.
not like.
Well, there's a lot of books around. Yeah.
But yeah, apparently you can just crumble it up and shove it in your clothes. And
Yeah. So, all right. So then, let's see. Where are we at then?
So Jack's on his way. They get into an accident, and so they got to hoof it on foot.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, the story of Sam doesn't really escalate until like a day or two later, when Laura ends up
Sick.
Yeah, she doesn't wake up. She's
Right.
she's so they decide, oh, the books are good for something other than just burning.
Mm-hmm.
We had to throw that in there.
Right.
So they figure out what she's got and that she needs penicillin. Well, where are we going to get that? Well, ding, hang on. A few scenes before there was this freighter, floating down the middle of the road in New York. So the boys have an idea of, well, hey, you know what? We can go run on there, and I'm sure we can get to, onto this Russian freighter. Okay,
Right.
so they decide they take these chairs and break off
The backing of them, yeah.
to try to turn them into snowshoes.
Right.
So they go running off, climb in there, and so the one area that we didn't talk about was the New York Zoo.
Another foreshadowing.
The foreshadowing of the wolves.
The wolves are gone, sir.
Oh my gosh. So there's two scenes at the zoo. There's one where all the animals are stirred up, and then as the rain is going nuts, there's another scene where we cut back to the zoo, and something has broken open the door or the wall behind the wolves, and they've gotten out.
Right.
So at some point they're going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
They're like that, pre-boss fight that you gotta deal with. So the boys go off to the ship. They're able to climb in. They're somehow able to quickly find, where the
Sick bay.
the sick bay, and so they eventually get in. They figure out where the penicillin is because it says penicillin on the bottle.
Of course.
Because all penicillin is apparently sold in English-speaking countries, whatever.
Right.
We never see anything about a syringe, but I guess the understanding is, well, they grabbed syringes while they were there. But as they're getting out, here come the wolves,
Right.
and so the boys are running around trying to trap the wolves in. They end up doing that, and then just as they're about to get out, JD goes and hurts himself.
Right.
So all the food that they had gathered that they wanted to take, we got to leave that behind because we got to drag JD's butt out of here.
No, they took it.
Oh,
they took
did
it.
they?
Yeah, they dragged
okay.
it with them.
I
Yeah.
thought they had left it all.
They put it on the raft.
Oh, so okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And they put him in there too.
Yeah, okay, so JD gets pulled out. They're pulling him by the raft.
But there was only one dosage of penicillin.
Yeah, I know.
No.
Go figure. So, you
So
better
he's
hope
gonna die.
that this works. They better hope this does it because there was only that one bottle. They end up getting out of there just as. Okay, so now we got to switch really quickly to Jack. So one of his friends, not Jason, the other gentleman, what was his name? I'm going to go back up in my notes here real quick. Frank. They're above something called the Sky Mall, which apparently has a glass roof. They're walking along. They don't realize that they're actually on top of that. The glass breaks. Frank falls in. He's still connected by a rope, but they're trying to get him out. So real quickly, Frank just decides he's going to sacrifice himself, takes out his knife, cuts the rope, and he falls so the other two can live.
That's right.
So let's get the story going. So they're going along a little further. They're getting close to New York if they're not already in New York. And here comes the eye of the storm. So there is a Wendy's that's close by. So they get in through the roof. And he ends up turning up, he ends up turning on all the
Was it a
gas
Wendy's?
stoves. Yeah.
Oh, I missed that part.
Yeah, it's just because, and the only way you see it is just because there happens to be a sign that is supposedly, I guess, up in the sky that tells you, oh, it's a Wendy's.
Okay.
So he ends up turning on all the gas stoves to keep them warm as the eye of the storm comes rolling in.
So they said that the temperature was dropping 10 degrees per second.
Yeah,
Is that right?
something like that.
Down past 150 degrees Fahrenheit. So do you think? See, I don't know how this works with the science, but do you think if you're standing close to a fire that you wouldn't die from that?
No, I mean, honestly,
Like, how close would you have to be to the fire?
well, here's the thing. We just saw, 30 minutes ago or 40 minutes ago where 3 helicopters come flying in and the fuel freezes.
Right.
So is this just like
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that.
super fuel in the stove? How is it that's on and cooking?
That's
and,
true.
And that the helicopters didn't.
So what about natural gas? Is that different than gas? Well, petrol or
Maybe. Because they, obviously they never answer that. It's just all of a sudden he's able to turn the stoves on, all
Right.
the burners.
Well, I know if anyone's listening that does know about this stuff probably thinks we're total idiots because we have no clue.
No
But
idea.
yeah, I know there's not gasoline or jet fuel running through Wendy's, but yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah. So, but he's able to save the 2 of them.
And the other thing, like, because they make it like they're running from this cooling that seems to be moving
Right.
towards them. It's not just happening everywhere all at the same time.
Right.
So they're running, and we see this by the icing on the
Yeah.
floor and the walls and stuff. So can you just slam the door in front of it, and then you're going to get away from it, or?
That's what they end up doing in the library.
Right.
They end up going into that room, that study or whatever. They close the door, and of course the door starts freezing, and
Yeah.
the windows around them are freezing. So they start throwing books, more books, more books.
Right.
So I guess the idea is if you have enough heat, you'll be able to survive negative 150 degree air coming at you. So
I don't know.
I guess to them that's their way of keeping all the characters alive, so that we can get to the end of this movie. So and that's where we're heading. Jason ends up waking up after a few hours because he got knocked on the head, and so he's rested. Jack is rested, so they're now able to go ahead and finish. So they end up walking. They continue to go. They end up getting to the library. They find where the entrance is because miraculously there's a big curve of snow, so they can just go down into it where everything else is covered, feet above these buildings, but this one just has this, this little tunnel curve
Right.
thing so they're able to get in. He's able to get to his son, and everybody that's there wakes up, because they were all sleeping after the negative 150 degree boss that comes through. And then so somehow once that's done, somehow they're able to use something to be able to communicate. Maybe it's satellite. I don't know. I don't remember that satellite phones were a big thing back then. Now obviously the satellites are still floating around, but a lot of times maybe back then you needed an antenna or something to be able to help transmit. I don't know. But they were able to communicate back with Mexico and say, hey, we're still alive. There's people that are living. Come get us.
Right.
So, all right. So now here's my big, huge question. So we're going to wrap this up, and then I'm going to get to my big, huge question. So the next thing you see is the vice president, who is now the president. He's in Mexico, so he says, "Oh, that's great news. We're going to send a rescue."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're in Mexico. Okay, and everybody's in New York. Okay, so all of a sudden, helicopters start showing up. Can helicopters traverse that far from Mexico all the way up to New York City in one tank?
I don't know. I don't know. Well, and it seemed to happen pretty quick. I don't know if days went by, but I mean,
yeah, because all of a sudden, the next thing we see is they're all out walking, towards the Statue of Liberty,
right?
And they get, and they're getting picked up.
Yeah.
But it's like, and there's tons of helicopters. They're just flying in from everywhere. But
right.
My thing is, I mean, can they really go a quarter of the way across the United States? I mean, even if it takes hours, I get that, but I mean, are they really designed to go that far? I mean, again, if anybody's listening, let us know if a helicopter can go from from somewhere across the border in Mexico all the way up to New York City,
right,
and back.
Yeah, yeah, and where they get fuel, I don't know,
exactly.
Because everything's frozen over,
right?
Yeah, but then again, it is only New York that's been covered in water and frozen.
Well, that's true. Now, I guess the other thing too is, I guess if we have to find a story in this, is anywhere that the eye of the storm, that the eye of the hurricane touched,
mm-hmm.
that's where it got to negative 150. So, right. If there are areas then that don't get touched by said eye of the storm, then maybe they can get to refueling stations along the way,
right.
and make their way up and around.
Yeah.
So we're trying to answer our own silly questions here.
Right.
So then
the vice president gives his Independence Day speech.
Yep.
Which is very, again, familiar.
And then, of course, the last line in the movie is one of the astronauts up in the space station saying, "Have you ever seen the air this clear?"
Of course. Because nature had basically righted all the wrongs that humankind had done with pollution.
That's right.
So, I mean, that's I know that's what this movie was trying to get to, is that, there's consequences to our technology and use of using resources.
Right.
And if we're, not cautious, then these are the types of consequences that could happen, right? That's been a debate going on for a long time.
Right, exactly.
Some would say it's not a debate for both sides would say that.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things that, but yeah. So, I mean, what did you think of this movie?
I mean, okay, so this is actually one of the movies that Dad and I would watch a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He just liked watching this movie. He just liked it for the entertainment value, and I think I got to the point where I just kind of did too. Because obviously, me personally, I don't believe in any of the science or hokum that that's coming through. Mm-hmm. But again, folks, that's just me. So I'm not going to get into a debate because I don't know how to debate this stuff. But anyway, so I don't know. There's a place in my heart for this movie just because. Dad used to like watching it,
mm-hmm.
and every once in a while he'd ask me to put it on. But I mean, overall, just for entertainment, it's okay. And again, 2004 is really, was really around the time that, like you were saying, that the CGI was really starting to come into its own.
Mm-hmm.
Just before you had the Lord of the Rings, the 3 movies come out, and they were doing awesome work with computer graphics even then. And that movie still holds up. I mean, even this movie still really holds up as far as graphics.
Mm-hmm.
The opening shot of the the miniature with the CG, and then coming into where the 3 guys were in the Antarctic. I don't know. To me, yeah, I mean, it does look a little computer-ish,
mm-hmm.
but it still looks good.
Right.
I mean, yes, granted, if they were to make that sort of same shot today, it would probably look as real as it's ever going to get.
Right.
But I mean, for then, I think it did really good. They had a $125 million budget. And again, for, 2002, 2003, that was a ton. That was a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
You look at some of the superhero movies today, those have between $200 and probably $400 million budget, not including any of the marketing or anything like that. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said for, for the movie overall, and just the way that it looks then, and like I said, it even looks good now.
Mm-hmm.
Their opening weekend was well over 68 million in U.S. and Canada, and they ended up grossing 186 million U.S. and Canada, and then 552 million worldwide by the time the movie left the theaters.
Right.
And then what I was looking at was it came out on DVD and VHS, I think, in 2007, and then Blu-ray came out a few years after that.
Right.
So, I again, aside from the silliness, I think of the science, I don't know. I think it's just a good, entertaining movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think as far as what you're saying there too, is they, around this time they were sort of producing these films, and it was a business model, right? It's like, okay, let's take, somewhere between 100 and 200 million. Let's see if we can turn it into 400 to 500 million. And we've got the technology to do it. It's become pretty efficient now, and quick, right? Yeah. And so I think movies like this and end of the world as we know it movies, why do we like them? I mean, it invokes that sort of emotion when you watch it. It's like, ooh, that would be scary, but it's at a distance, right?
Right.
We're able to watch this and kind of, when we ask those what if questions, we get to watch it come to life without it actually happening, right?
Exactly.
And so with a movie like that, it's very rare that you'll have a movie like this with some sort of storyline that is very compelling and art driven.
Right.
Right. That's why we see these formulas at work, and they took the formulas.
Right.
Right. And they're like, okay, let's take, something bad's going to happen. Nobody believes the guy, the one person. That's the character we'll follow. And, let's mix it with the usual story of, a dad who's a good person, but on the wrong track, trying to connect with his son. And then they come together, all that kind of stuff.
Well, and, I think one area that I can think of that it really seems to do this well, and I hate to say this, but is like all those Hallmark movies.
Yeah, sure.
Where it's, one person doesn't believe in love, and they end up meeting somebody who does.
Right.
And then, at some point, they're starting to come together, but then there's something that breaks the two apart.
Right.
And then they come back together at the very end because there was some sort of misunderstanding, and then they kiss for the first time, and then the movie's over.
Right. Yeah, so to me, it's like this is the difference between art and entertainment.
Yeah.
Which we usually throw together, but entertainment is something like this. It's
right.
There's a reason why it's like, hey, let's put that on to watch it.
Yeah.
Where as opposed to something that's art that's like thought provoking, it makes us think and invokes this sort of emotion with the story. This just is more of an entertainment value piece.
And not to get too far into the next movie that we're going to do, the day after, because I actually just watched that the other day, and we thought about it, my mom and I think I was probably 11 or 12 years old when that came out. You were probably like 5 or 6, because it came out in '83.
Yeah, I was about 7.
7, okay.
Yeah.
So, and we were still living in the middle of the Cold War.
Right.
So that was going on. So the idea that
was a little different.
That was very much different. That was, could this may actually happen, as opposed to, well, will all the stars align right so that, a big piece of ice will fall off into the water and,
Well, and for different people, I mean, there are a lot of people that believe that this is sort of that same imminent threat, right? With the like an ecological disaster. So yeah, as far as that goes, for me, I definitely believe that climate will change and has changed, right? We've had ice ages, we've had things, whether or not we have that sort of control to make those things happen. I don't know about all that, but I know that climate can shift and change, and that is pretty scary, right? If that there's all sorts of things about weather, climate changing, about the shift in polarity. I don't know if you've heard about that, where it's sort of like instead of the North and South Pole, basically the equator becomes the North and South Pole.
Oh, nice.
Flips and switches the other way, and that there's a theory that that's happened 100,000 years ago, and it happens every 100,000 years. It kind of has these 100,000 year cycle. There's all this type of stuff, right? So those types of things, yeah, that's one thing. But I think there's a difference too between natural disaster. So if it's natural, it's out of our control, right? Whether the sun's going to explode or a meteor's going to, or an asteroid's going to hit us, all we can do is sit and watch, But something, and we'll get into it next time, but the day after, that is a complete man-made thing. Nuclear destruction. So I think it invokes a different emotion. But, so yeah, I mean, Day After Tomorrow, I always thought that they named it that because, I mean, this was a long movie. It was like 2.5 hours, I think.
Something. I mean,
yeah.
It was kind of long.
I mean, I think they called it Day After Tomorrow because that's when it ends, when it started.
That's when the movie finally ends.
But they tried to fit so much stuff in there. I feel like they really tried to pack it with a little too much. And they could have done less, and it probably would have helped us felt a little more connection to the characters. Because I just remember watching it, and they would introduce these people that they just kill off right away, and you thought maybe they were going to be a character, and they were not.
Exactly.
And it's just like, oh wait, who is this? Who's that guy? Okay, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, so this is like usually if you look at like the criticism on it, these types of movies tend to be like in a 40 to 60% range with Rotten Tomatoes, type of thing. Where that's usually what you get. I just chalk it up as that sort of entertainment value. You are watching it for you want it to be realistic looking. You want to be convincing that looks real. So that has an important part of it. So
yeah, and this movie was 2 hours. The runtime was 2 hours 4 minutes.
Oh, that's it. Okay,
yeah.
That wasn't too bad. It felt a lot longer.
And folks, you'll have to forgive us. As I'm sitting here looking up Rotten Tomato scores, I think we'll definitely be adding that as we go forward. Again, this is our first episode, and so we're kind of working out the kinks as we go.
Yeah, it says Rotten Tomatoes was 45% and audience was 50%. So that's pretty much it's on par.
Line, so yeah.
All right.
So folks, what do you think? About this movie? We'd be really interested in seeing any of your comments. So this is going to be. I realize that as you're hearing this, you'll probably end up eventually finding this, but we'll be putting this on YouTube and right now at least on Spotify, because I was able to make accounts for both of those. So we'll be uploading this, and we'll probably be putting these in some other places as we go along. But yeah, everybody, thank you very much for joining. Thank you for listening again. I am on YouTube under the Carnivore Crusader. If you want to follow me there, talking about carnivore. The carnivore diet, and Jason, you're on. And I always get this name wrong because I never look it up. Real Life with a Couple of Therapists, and you're on Apple and Spotify.
Yeah.
Okay.
Apple and Spotify.
And he does that with his wife, and you do what, once a week or something like that? Or?
Yeah, once a week. We've taken a little break from it, but we're gonna be doing that every week. She's getting her credentials going, so we've taken a little time, but. Yeah,
that's right.
So we basically do a podcast about mental health issues and things like that.
Yeah, and I've actually had a few people say that I should interview you for Carnivore for my channel, and then you should interview me for for the mental health. So I think
There we
we'll work on getting that. But anyway, thank you very much, folks. Thank you for joining, and we will catch you on the next one.
All right. Bye-bye.